Okay, last one. So we have God, we have Bible interpretation, we have religion and science, and finally, and perhaps most importantly, religion and violence. If there's one thing now that I hear over and over, I hear most often, it's religion and violence. It's an old Enlightenment argument. Read it back in the 18th century, even 17th century. It goes like this. Religion is irrational. Therefore, the only way that religious people can adjudicate their disputes is through violence. Now, read that in Spinoza, Leibniz, Hegel, Kant, all the great founders of modernity intellectually. That's why so many of those figures tried to find some purely rational form of religion. Think of Locke's book, on the reasonableness of Christianity. Think of Kant's religion within the limits of reason alone, right? Or think of Jefferson's Bible. Jefferson takes all the supernatural elements out of the Bible. Well, they're all trying in that Enlightenment way to find a religion that's perfectly reasonable, because they saw religion as irrational and therefore violent. Now, when was that old argument stirred up? It was stirred up at September 11th. That's why I don't think it's the least bit accidental that the new atheist movement emerged after September 11th. Read the Hitchens and Dawkins and Sam Harris's now and company, Daniel Dennett. You'll find over and over again that same argument. Nope, there it is. Irrational religion becoming almost ipso facto violent. Now, once that's stirred up, what do people do is they go back to the Bible. And believe me, people who aren't very pious, but man, do they know their Bible when it comes to the violent text of the Bible. They really know the violent text. Smashing heads of babies, Yahweh commanding all sorts of deeply objectionable things. One of the great texts that everyone refers to is in 1 Samuel. When Saul is removed as king, and the reason he's removed is he doesn't put the ban on the Amalekites. Remember, the ban ordered by God is to kill every man, woman, child, and animal. So when Samuel the prophet comes along and he hears the animals making noise and he sees the king, Agag, the king of the Amalekites, still alive, he goes up to Saul and says, "What's going on?" And Saul goes, "Hey, I was pretty good here. I killed off most of the Amalekites, and I know I kept a few here, but hey, we won the battle." Samuel is not the least bit pleased. Dismisses Saul as king, and then it says, takes the sword and hacked Agag to pieces. And I must tell you, after I read that story, this is the word of the Lord, Now, I bring that one out because I hear it all the time on the YouTube forums. And you can find, of course, many others, a text like that. So people say, see, there it is. There's violent religion. It confirms the old Enlightenment argument. It confirms the post-September 11th perspective. That's why you people are dangerous. Now look at all of Christopher Hitchens' debates and commentaries. Over and over again, you religious people are the most dangerous people on the planet, So that's the argument, and I hear it all the time. So what do we do? How do we respond to this great obstacle to announcing the faith? A couple of simple observations here. Christians read the Bible from the standpoint of the last book in the Bible. We find in the book of Revelation that great scene when John the seer is up in the heavenly court. And out comes the scroll, remember, with the 7 seals. What does the scroll stand for? You could say it stands for all of history. It stands for the scripture in their totality. Who will open it? And the seer weeps because no one's appearing who can open the scroll. And then the announcement comes that the Lion of Judah will open the scroll. And then, in a delicious irony, so typical of the Bible, the Lion of Judah is coming, but who appears? A lamb standing as though slain. A lamb? A little lammy is going to come out now, and then he's been slain? I mean, this is not a real inspiring figure. I'm looking for a powerful figure who can open up the scroll of history, the scroll of the Bible. Out comes, of course, it's a symbol of the crucified and risen Jesus. The one who, in a great and supreme act of nonviolence, took upon himself the violence of the world and swallowed it up in the ever greater divine mercy. He's the one who opens the seals, who opens the scroll and can read it. You see the point being made there, and the church fathers saw this. We must read the whole of the Bible from the standpoint of the crucified and risen Christ, from the standpoint of the nonviolent Christ. We don't simply isolate passages in the Bible on their own, but rather we read the Bible according to its great themes, patterns, and trajectories. Where do they all coalesce? Where do they all come to their culminating point? In the Lamb standing as though slain. It's the nonviolent Christ who opens up for us the Scriptures. Okay, now that's as old as the church fathers, that perspective. Having said it, they know they face this problem. Well, then how do you read these startling texts, especially from the Old Testament? How do you read them? Can I go back to Origen, whom I mentioned earlier? I think one of the best readers of the Bible in the whole tradition. Dies in the year 230, very early figure. Origen said, in light of this interpretive principle, we must read these texts in a spiritualizing way. We must read them as evocative of the spiritual battle, the battle of sin and grace, if you want. Now, go back to the famous one from 1 Samuel. Put the ban on the Amalekites. Why the Amalekites, Origen asks. Now go back to Deuteronomy. Remember that scene where the Israelites are battling the Amalekites and Moses has his arms up in the air? As long as he's praying like this, Israel has the better of the battle. His arms get weary, so they have to be propped up by Aaron and by Hur, right? And as long as they're propped up, then Israel carries the day. And the pericope ends by saying, and then Israel mowed down Amalek with the edge of the sword. And then it adds, Israel will battle Amalek up and down the ages. Now, if that's simply about this ancient Near Eastern tribe, that text doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? What do you mean Israel's going to battle this little Middle Eastern tribe up and down the ages? So Origen suggests, again, it's a very ancient reading, Origen suggests, the Amalekites symbolize something here. They symbolize all those powers that stand opposed to God's creative intention. I'll quote a great Protestant theologian here, the greatest of the 20th century, namely Karl Barth. Barth talks about das Nichtige, the nothing, the non-being. And you can see it symbolized it up and down the Bible. It's in the tohu vabohu of the primal chaos. Remember, God brings order out of the tohu vabohu, the primal disorder. You see it in the stormy waters of the Red Sea. You can see it in the stormy waters upon which Jesus walks. And you can see it, Barth suggests, following Origen, in all those powers opposed to Israel. Now see, please, friends, don't politicize it, spiritualize it. What's God's creative intention? Love, forgiveness, compassion, nonviolence. What stands opposed to it? Well, we know all the ways of sin. We're all bedeviled by them. The Bible, you might say now, is the story of this great struggle. What must Israel, read Israel now, not politically, not culturally, read Israel spiritually. What must Israel do? It must wage war. How must it wage war? All the way. Samuel hacked Agag to pieces. Origen suggests it's the great struggle against sin, hatred, violence itself. How must you fight it? All the way down. What mustn't you do with evil? You mustn't play around with it. See, now that reading begins to open up, doesn't it? What's Saul's problem? Saul's problem, he's playing around with evil. Oh, we won the battle. Yeah, but I kept a little bit here. I didn't completely destroy it. People, maybe some in this room, I've dealt a lot over the years with people who go through the 12-step process, dealing with addictions. Suppose someone says to his AA sponsor, I'm doing great. I just have one drink every 5 days. What would he say? Man, you got to hack Agag to pieces. That's the problem here. You know what I'm saying? There's a evil here. There's a dysfunction here that you can't mess around with. Suppose a husband comes to his wife, says, honey, I love you, and our marriage is just the most important thing in the world to me, which is why I'm faithful to you 90% of the time. Right? How's that going to work out? Or I say to Cardinal George, Your Eminence, I've been a priest for 25 years, and what a great joy it is, and celibacy is a beautiful gift from God, which is why I'm faithful to it, you know, when I'm not on vacation. What would he say? He'd do, well, he wouldn't laugh, trust me. But you see the point I'm making, and we all know about this. There are certain forms of dysfunction, certain forms of hatred and violence and all that have to be battled all the way down. What are these great texts trying to do? They're trying to show us this truth. Now, I'll make one last stop here before I end the talk. With Jesus crucified. What's he doing on the cross? One way to read it is, he's doing battle with sin, evil, death itself, all the way down. Why did God have to send his son into this terrible suffering? Don't pose the question that way. But rather the son's willingness, like a great nonviolent warrior, the son's willingness to go all the way down to the limits of God-forsakenness, so as to do battle with das Nichtige, with the tohu vabohu, with Amalek, however you want to symbolize it. Not messing around with it, not playing halfway games, but battling it all the way down. Hacking Agag to pieces if you want. What's he hacking to pieces? Sin and death. The Bible, you might say, in these quote-unquote violent texts, is trying to communicate, it seems to me, this great spiritual truth. And this opens up to us when we read the Bible, the way Origen suggests, from the standpoint of the Lamb standing as though slain, who alone can open the seals. Just a last couple of words here by way of conclusion. Go back a couple years, I was visiting my brother, and my eldest niece, his eldest daughter, was finishing up high school at a very good Catholic high school in the Chicago area. And my brother proudly said to me, oh, take a look at the books on the table. Those are Neela's books for the coming year. And so I went to the pile of books, and on the very top of it was Hamlet. Shakespeare's, not Hamlet for dummies, Hamlet, right? Under Hamlet was Virgil's Aeneid in Latin. So she was a Latin student, and she's reading Virgil in Latin. Under that was a physics book with Einsteinian equations bristling with complexity. Under that was a big paperback book with a picture on the cover and big print and a lot of photos on the inside. Her religion book. And I went over to my brother and I said, do you have a problem with this? He said, well, why? I said, she's reading Shakespeare in English. She's reading Virgil in Latin. She's reading Einstein in physics. And she's reading a comic book for religion. You know? So you know what I did? Her birthday was around that time. And usually I would just give her a little bit of money. I went out that year and I bought her volume 1 of Aquinas' Summa Contra Gentiles. I bought her Augustine's Confessions. I bought her the Divine Comedy. And I bought her Chesterton's Orthodoxy. And what I did, I put the little, I got paperbacks. I put them down. I said, now those are the Catholic versions of the other books you're reading. That's at that level. Now, I say it not just to Catholics, but to I think all people interested in evangelization and reaching out to the culture. I think we have to be attentive to the great intelligence of our Christian tradition. We do have a struggle today. I mean, I came of age in the years after Vatican II when there was a great Irenicism about the culture. You know, that we're going to reach out to the culture is good, and it is in many ways. I predicate my internet work on that assumption. But the culture has, in many ways, turned on the Christian project. At the very least, has very serious questions about it. I do think we have to be properly armed, if you will, intellectually armed, to deal with this challenge. But we should always do it, of course, as happy warriors, When I was a kid, that was a term used of Hubert Humphrey, who was a friend of Reinhold Niebuhr, wasn't he? G.K. Chesterton, one of my heroes, happy warrior, went out to meet the culture with a great joie de vivre, with great confidence, but with an intelligent capacity to engage it. Maybe I'll give the last word to Paul Tillich as I speak at this great Protestant college. Paul Tillich said, we should always meet the culture mit klingendem Spiel. And that's German for roughly with fife and drum. And see, what I like about that is fife and drum, man, that's a militaristic image. So we have to meet the culture with a sense of, we know what we're about, and we can take on the challenge. But it's not like going out with guns and cannons. It's going out mit klingendem Spiel, with a kind of joyful, playful panache. And I think that's the best way that all of us interested in evangelizing the culture can do our work. God bless you all, and thanks for coming and listening tonight. Thank you. Thanks.